The forest whispered menacing secrets as Linda, a Native American woman with eyes that shone like the full moon, ran desperately. Behind her, shadows moved, swift and silent as hungry panthers. Jason, the newly born vampire, his heart torn between the darkness consuming him and the burgeoning love for Linda, watched from afar. A scream ripped through the silence. Linda's cry. But was she being hunted by wild wolves, or was something far worse lurking in the shadows? The Amazon rainforest, a verdant and mysterious labyrinth, concealed secrets as old as the trees themselves. The moon, a silver disk in the night sky, illuminated only patches of the dense vegetation, creating shadows that danced and writhed like living beings. Linda, her long black hair flowing in the wind, ran incessantly, her bare feet barely touching the damp earth. Her heart pounded in her chest, a frantic rhythm echoing the fear that filled her. She felt hot breath close behind her, like a sinister presence watching, ready to attack. It wasn't just wolves, she knew. She felt the threat of something older and more malevolent on her skin. Linda's recent transformation, the discovery of her ancestral werewolf powers, had changed the forest. Before, it was home, a place of peace and connection with nature. Now, it was a battlefield where every shadow hid danger, every whisper of the wind carried a threat. She carried within her the strength of her ancestors, the strength of the wolves, but this strength was still a turbulent river, difficult to control. The memory of Jason's intense gaze, the vampires, still echoed in her mind, mixed with the adrenaline of fear. Would Jason be her salvation, or part of her nightmare? The sounds of the forest, the distant howl of a wolf, the chirping of nocturnal insects, the creaking of trees, were a symphony of terror for Linda. She stumbled over roots. Dry branches snapped under her feet, but she didn't stop, driven by a pure survival instinct. In the darkness, she spotted a clearing, a small gap in the green wall surrounding her. A faint hope ignited in her heart. From afar, Jason watched her, his piercing gaze, like that of a wildcat, fixed on Linda. His pale skin, contrasting with the dark night, reflected the moon like a mirror. The scent of Linda's fear, mixed with the sweet aroma of her skin, was torture to him. The curse of bloodlust constantly haunted him, but the fascination he felt for the Native American woman was even greater, a burning flame that rivaled the insatiable desire that consumed him. He wanted to protect her, but he was caught between his duty to his vampire master and the love blossoming in his heart, a seed planted in the most unlikely of lands. Jason felt torn in two, battling the darkness consuming him from within. Suddenly, the shadows pursuing Linda materialized. They weren't just wolves, but creatures of darkness, twisted and grotesque beings, with eyes shining with a dark energy that chilled the soul. They were servants of the vampire master, and the hunt for Linda was a whim of their lord. Jason realized he couldn't stand idly by. He needed to help Linda, even at the risk of facing his master's wrath. The decision was made in an instant, an act of rebellion against the darkness within him and against the threat to the one he had already come to love. It was a new, intense love, a love that fought against Jason's own dark nature, a love that might be his salvation, his and Linda's salvation. Linda, sensing the creature's approach, felt the ancestral strength within her explode. Her eyes blazed with a golden light, and a guttural growl escaped her lips. She prepared to fight, to confront the darkness with the strength of the wolves that ran in her veins. But at the same time, she saw Jason approaching, the shadowy figure of the vampire emerging from the woods, a knight of the night who had come to confront them, the promise of help from an unexpected place, a possible ally in a bloody battle. Hope formed in her heart, a hope as fragile as flower petals in the forest's darkness, but a hope that propelled her, a sign that perhaps, just perhaps, she could survive this night. Linda's growl echoed through the clearing, a wild sound that made the creatures of darkness hesitate for a moment. Their eyes, previously full of fear, now shone with a golden light, the ancestral strength of the wolves taking over her body. It was a powerful sight, frightening to the shadowy creatures. But they were many, and their sharp teeth gleamed in the moonlight, eager for the attack. Linda prepared for the confrontation, her fists clenched, ready to use the ancestral strength that had awakened within her, a raw and untamed power. The fight would be difficult, unequal, and she knew she would run a great risk. Jason, emerging from the shadows like a specter, watched the scene with a mixture of admiration and concern. Linda's transformation fascinated him. The wild beauty emanating from her was hypnotic, an incredible contrast to the darkness surrounding him. But the danger was imminent, and he knew he couldn't just watch. He was a vampire, cursed by bloodlust. But at that moment, the desire to protect Linda surpassed his own dark nature. It was an internal conflict that tormented him, a struggle between the darkness consuming him and the unexpected love he felt for this courageous Native American woman. The fight began with brutal violence. The creatures of darkness attacked with fury, their blows swift and relentless. Linda, using her new powers with surprising skill, defended herself with claws and teeth, fighting with the ferocity of a wild wolf. She moved with incredible agility, dodging attacks, her movements precise and lethal. The ancestral strength flowing through her veins was both shield and weapon, a protection against the darkness surrounding her. Jason entered the fight with the deadly dexterity of a vampire, his movements swift and precise as sharp knives. His supernatural strength, combined with supernatural speed, wreaked havoc on the creatures of darkness. But with each creature he defeated, he felt the bloodlust growing within him, a constant battle between his primal instinct and his new love for Linda. He fought with the strength of a desperate man, not only to protect Linda, but also to fight against the darkness that plagued him, a desperate effort to control the dark nature of his new existence. Despite their combined strength, the creatures of darkness were numerous. Linda and Jason fought bravely, but they were beginning to tire. One of the Vampire Master's servants managed to injure Linda, scratching her arm. Blood flowed, a crimson river under the moonlight. The pain hit her, but it didn't break her. She was determined to fight to the end, to protect the flame of hope that had ignited in her heart. However, exhaustion weighed down her movements. The fight was becoming increasingly desperate. Suddenly, a loud and deep howl echoed through the forest, a sound that chilled the blood in the veins of the creatures of darkness. Other wolves, drawn by the sound of battle, emerged from the shadows, joining the fight. It was as if the forest itself was fighting alongside Linda, demonstrating her ancestral connection with the animals. Jason, observing the scene, realized the deep connection between Linda and nature, a power greater than he could ever have imagined. The arrival of the wolves turned the tide of the battle. The creatures of darkness, overwhelmed by the combined force of Linda, Jason, and the pack, began to retreat, fleeing in disarray into the shadows of the forest. Victory seemed certain, but the price paid was high. Linda was injured, exhausted, but her eyes shone with determination. Jason, feeling the weight of the battle, approached her, concerned about her condition. The love that had been born in the midst of chaos and violence had become stronger than the darkness that imprisoned him. Fear mixed with admiration in his gaze as he saw the woman's strength and the bravery that guided her. That moment of struggle, of unity against the darkness, sealed the bond between them, a strong and unbreakable bond, despite all the differences between a vampire and a werewolf woman who loved each other under the gaze of the full moon. The Amazon rainforest, a labyrinth of shadows and whispers, witnessed Linda's desperate struggle. She ran, her bare feet slipping on the damp earth, her ragged breath cutting through the silence of the night. Behind her, the shadows moved, swift and relentless, and Linda felt their cold breath on her neck, the constant threat of something monstrous and hungry. They weren't just wolves, they were creatures of darkness, servants of the Vampire Master, their eyes gleaming with an evil that froze the soul. Fear was an immense wave, almost suffocating her, but the memory of Jason's intense gaze, the hope in his eyes, propelled her forward. He was a vampire, yes, a creature of the night, but there was something in his gaze that made her feel safe. Linda stumbled, falling to her knees on the damp earth. The creatures of darkness caught up to her, their sharp teeth gleaming in the moonlight. She felt the sharp pain of their claws tearing her skin, but the ancestral strength of the wolves within her propelled her to rise. She growled, her eyes shining with a powerful, wild, golden light. She was a warrior, a daughter of the forest, and she would fight to the end. Suddenly, a shadowy figure emerged from the shadows. It was Jason, his face pale, his gaze determined. He was a vampire, yes, but he was fighting alongside her against the darkness that threatened them. His strength was supernatural, his movements swift and precise, like a deadly dance in the darkness. He launched himself at the creatures of darkness, his hands like sharp claws, tearing the flesh and bone of the monsters, while Linda fought with the ferocity of a wild wolf. The fight was brutal, bloody, Linda felt the pain, the exhaustion, but Jason's presence beside her gave her strength. The love that bloomed between them, as improbable as it was powerful, was a shield against the darkness. Every blow Jason struck, every growl from Linda, was a cry against the curse that threatened them all. The forest seemed to vibrate with the violence of the battle, the trees whispering words of support amid the chaos. But the creatures of darkness were numerous, relentless. One of them grabbed Linda, its claws sinking into her arm. A cry of pain escaped her lips, but she didn't give in. Jason, seeing Linda in danger, growled softly. A lightning-fast movement, and he knocked the creature down with a fury that even surprised Linda. Jason's body was tired. The bloodlust tormented him every moment. But the strength of his love for Linda was greater than his own nature. It was an infernal internal struggle, a battle against his own instincts. He was a vampire, yes, but his heart beat for her, for the courageous Native American woman who fought with claws and teeth, defending the faint flame of hope that ignited in her chest. At that moment, a deep and terrifying sound echoed through the forest, the howl of a pack of wolves. 2, 3, then 10, 20 wolves emerged from the shadows, their eyes gleaming in the darkness. They were Linda's ancestors, the guardians of the forest, arriving to help her in her darkest hour. The creatures of darkness, frightened by the arrival of the wolves, hesitated. The battle turned. The wolves attacked with all their might, their teeth and claws tearing the flesh of the creatures, while Linda and Jason faced them, side by side, united against evil. It was an act of courage, a desperate struggle for survival. With every howl, every growl, a wave of hope swept through the forest. Finally, the last creatures of darkness fell, defeated. The forest fell silent. The air still vibrated with the adrenaline of the battle. Linda, wounded but victorious, leaned on Jason. Their eyes met, and in that gaze, tired but hopeful, the promise of a future together, a future where love could conquer darkness, took shape. The full moon, a silent witness to the battle, shone brightly, illuminating the wounded but happy faces of the Native American woman and the vampire, who, despite their differences, had found a love that transcended fear, curses, and death itself. The fight was over, but their journey to find a future together had only just begun. Linda and Jason, exhausted but alive, embraced under the silvery light of the moon. The battle had been terrible, but they had won. Linda's ancestral strength, combined with Jason's supernatural strength and the unexpected help of the wolf pack, had been enough to repel the vampire master's servants. For a moment, peace hung in the forest, a precious silence that broke the sound of the two lovers' ragged breathing. Jason, feeling Linda's fragility in his arms, felt even greater love for her, a love that surpassed even his bloodlust. He kissed her, a soft and lingering kiss, a seal of their victory against the darkness, a harbinger of an uncertain but hopeful future. But the tranquility was broken by a sinister sound, a metallic, cutting sound that echoed through the forest, tearing the silence of the night. It wasn't the howl of a wolf, nor the roar of a creature of darkness. It was the sound of metal, cold, menacing metal, coming from somewhere beyond the clearing. The two separated, Linda and Jason's eyes meeting in astonishment. They looked around, trying to identify the source of the sound, the adrenaline rushing back into their veins, even after the arduous battle they had just won. The forest, which had previously seemed welcoming, now seemed the stage for a new, even more terrifying threat. Linda, with the ancestral strength still pulsing in her veins, felt a shiver run down her spine. It wasn't the threat of the creatures of darkness. This was a different kind of fear, colder, more calculated. The feeling of a sinister, powerful presence watching them, something even more dangerous than any servant of the vampire master. It was a frightening premonition that chilled the soul. Jason, despite his immortal nature, felt a wave of apprehension run through his body, a warning that something worse was to come, something that could threaten not only their lives, but also the forest itself, something that perhaps not even their combined powers would be enough to face. A metallic gleam emerged from among the trees, cutting through the darkness. It was a tall and imposing figure, clad in black and gleaming armor. A warrior, not of flesh and blood, but of metal, of an unknown technology, advancing with chilling coldness. The threat wasn't just a new force in the fight between humans, werewolves, and vampires. It was a different, timeless force, with technology that transcended all others. It was something beyond both their imaginations, something that left them completely terrified. The figure's sword gleamed in the moonlight, reflecting death and destruction. Who was this warrior? And what was his goal? What was this new threat that arose in the midst of battle? Was it a warrior from another world? Or perhaps something worse? The battle had just ended, and a new battle was about to begin. The fight for survival, for the hope of a future together, was far from over. And Linda and Jason, exhausted, wounded, but united by love, prepared to face the greatest challenge of their lives. An unknown threat from another dimension, a threat that could extinguish all their hopes, erase all their victories. The forest whispered again, but this time, it wasn't a menacing secret, but a harbinger of a much larger and more dangerous war. The fight for their love and survival had barely begun.